You're on.
All right, good evening. We'll call to order this workshop of the Parsonsville Planning Board at 6:02 PM on Wednesday, March 5th. Pardon me, getting stuff together. So the workshop's purpose is to review our ordinances, tie right in with our processes and procedures. I think primarily one of our topics on here is the correct process and procedures for cannabis facility licensing. And a reminder that we cannot workshop specific applications or applicants. We can talk about the generalities of the process. So watch our language on that, meaning every form of language.
Shut up, Raj.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw, I sent to Desiree, she copied, because we currently do not have a conditional use application. So I drafted a probably more lengthy one that's needed.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I did it because I also feel that a lot of people don't understand the difference between conditional use and site plan, or know how to reference the difference between the two. Whereas from what I can see, a site plan is more about like the construction versus the actual use. I guess that's one way to put it. I guess a conditional use is more designed to propose uses to allow in a zone that's already zoned for it, whereas a site plan is more for the design and layout. Disagree with that? So I incorporated not only in this application I put together, which may be missing information, the information that we need, but also the information that's included in the definition of site plan application and what the board should be looking at as well. So if you guys want to look that over and tell me your thoughts, that's fine. Not a required item. Take. You guys are done because I actually already know what it says because I. And I didn't write this specific to the use of cannabis. I meant specific to the wording of the conditional use ordinance. Because I would assume that, am I improper in saying, Jen, if you don't mind if I call you out, that a lot of the items in the licensing of the ordinance are dealt with by the select board versus the conditional use application. So I'm trying not to get us where we were before, where we're asking for too much information, because that's apparently the point. We're supposed to be asking for less information, not more. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track. Everything listed in here for consideration is what's listed in our ordinance book of what we should, at a minimum, looking at. Desiree, did you read through this?
I just did, and I noticed.
I have not edited anything.
Okay.
I just finished this at 4 o'clock.
So my suggestion is to move the signatures up under, where you have signature of town clerk.
Okay.
Planning board and CBO, just move those up underneath where the date is received. So they're together. Let's see,
I'm curious why I included things like date of public hearing, date advertising, public hearing. We get those questions to us all the time. Where do we advertise? When do we advertise? So if they're included on this application, we can cover that right away.
Exactly. On the back of page 2, you're missing number 5. Either formatted or it's missing.
It's reformatted. There wasn't a number 5. Number 5 was originally additional materials attached for consideration, which did not specify in our ordinance what those materials may be. It said any materials that may be considered. So I left it as a blanket item.
And then the only other thing that jumped out at me was on page 3. You have a V with an A on the end.
Yeah, Thea,
Yeah, other than that, that's all that jumped out at me right away.
you guys want to go through this as a group? Do you want to read this on your own and ask questions? How do you want to do this? Do you even want to consider this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do this.
I think it's,
This is overdue.
is a place for it, but is it commercial or is it residential?
This is an application for conditional use based on the ordinance, so it would be for anything that our book calls for a conditional use permit.
And everything.
And like I said, I did not make it specific to cannabis, even though that's one of the things we're gonna talk about tonight. Because there are other forms of licenses. But if someone comes before us and asks, we now know that a site plan and a conditional use permit cannot be interchangeable. According to
Ordinance.
a town attorney.
Speaking of the town attorney, he is out on vacation this week.
I saw that.
Okay. He did say that he would be more than happy to come to the 319 meeting.
That's good.
Because I offered the next workshop and he said he'd rather meet with you as soon as possible, so.
I agree.
He can come to the 319 meeting.
This is for businesses, and this for signage, I didn't.
So we shouldn't be, according to my exchange, that's part of correspondence with the town attorney, we should only be asking questions on a conditional use permit under the items that are listed under the ordinance.
Oh, okay.
It's a site plan, a conditional
Right.
use permit is supposed to be asking for less information than a site
Oh,
plan.
okay.
However, it does say that the planning board can ask for additional information that is a sees fit,
Okay.
so
Okay. So
we could ask for
we
that.
could leave that under that blanket one.
But this is the basic information that is
Right.
required. Unless I missed something, which you're happy to go through it. Again, I didn't really edit because I was in a hurry, trying to just get all the language in there, so I didn't go back through. Yeah.
So the other thing I would suggest is putting near the top how many copies you want of the application, because this just leaves it to one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's no specification in the ordinance like the site plan application.
I would do at least 8 copies, because it's a 7-member board, so 7, 1 for each member, 8 for me, 9 for our CEO. So a minimum of 9,
I'd say 10.
So I'd say maybe 10 just to be safe.
yeah.
Other one can be put on file.
So that's right on section 221H, it says degree landscaping. It should be probably degree of landscaping.
Sorry, which one?
First page
Yep.
on 2.
I'm sorry, which page?
The second page
Second page.
after the cover,
Yep.
Yeah.
or the opposite side of the cover page.
Yeah,
Degree of landscaping.
Degree of-
Things and other design elements have been proposed, implemented to mitigate adverse impacts on surrounding properties. These are standards for conditionals, for the conditional permit to be met. They're not something that,
You pulled that directly from the ordinance.
yeah. I'd like to say word for word, but it probably does say degree of. I can look, I have it right here. Again, typing fast.
yeah.
Okay.
You sent me the Word copy and I couldn't find it, so I had to retype everything. Excuse me.
Read it.
That's the first page.
It's actually worded degree to which instead of degree of, even though I think the language is similar.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just don't think it was
An ordinance.
put in your participles.
So the applicant would come to us, they provide us the application fee, the escrow fee, or the CEO fee, this would all be taken before we got here. It would be signed off by the town clerk, Desiree, and the CEO. It would be filled out by the applicant. The only thing I did was add an email, which is not on any of our application forms, and a lot of people communicate by email.
It is, I added it and we finally got it on the website a little bit ago.
Oh, perfect.
So, yeah, because I keep asking for,
And then property owner's signature is just the whole authorization if the property owner is not the applicant. Then we would be asking them for the site location like we do for other purposes, tax map, lot number, zoning district number, the number of acres, and the exact nature of the proposed use. Some people are very brief. Pardon me, some people go on, so I put attach extra paper for additional documentation. A scale drawing of the lot, with the location, so it's a sketch map. Showing existing of proposed buildings, structures, natural features. I would think, wouldn't you, that most of the time these conditional use permits aren't going to be for construction, they're going to be more. I guess my question is, I guess for all of you, is if it's for additional buildings, wouldn't they have to also do a site plan?
What do you mean by additional buildings?
So the application for conditional use generally is for something, an existing building, so we can use it for something specific. But if they wanted to build a garage to go with the existing building, this conditional use permit wouldn't be sufficient alone, would it?
No, I think
So they'd have to go through a site plan review and a conditional use.
they'd have to get a building permit and,
Am I incorrect in that assumption, Jesse?
I don't think we have to.
So if I came to you and I wanted to go to where the bakery is and I wanted to open a restaurant and I had to fill out a conditional use permit, just say, and I wanted to build an outdoor pavilion, would I need to fill out both the conditional use and the site plan?
So this is my first chance with a conditional use too, so. Yeah, I would say yes.
yeah.
According to our permissible use table
Yep.
in the land ordinance, there's only one thing, other than this cannabis thing, that has conditional uses authorized in it. And that's large-scale water extractions under rural farm forest.
So if Poland Springs comes to town.
Yeah,
we're down
so
with that.
so all these hypothetical situations of other stuff, according to our existing land use table, are a non-thing until those get determined by change. So if you go to, I think it's page 18 in your ordinance of permissible uses, it's all R and S and stuff like that. If there's a C in there, that's a conditional use.
Correct.
And the only other thing other than marijuana is large water, what's it, extraction? Large scale water extraction.
I did review that table. My goal in making this application was so that we never find ourselves in the position we're in right now.
100%. So, but I'm just saying, so as far as people.
So the likelihood of us having to ask the question, we're gonna have another site.
I guess, so to answer the question about like, a building being changed into another thing and this being a thing, that should never be the case unless this table is specifically changed to where it becomes a C, for a conditional use permit.
Right. Yeah, so it would be a split. We couldn't conditional use the bakery, as you put it, but then if he's gonna build a pavilion, it would have to be totally.
But it's permitted, so I wouldn't need a conditional use permit.
So
It's a poor example.
So, but I'm saying unless this table changes, like unless like a restaurant becomes like a C instead of an R.
Right.
Then you would never entertain the idea of conditional use permits.
Right.
Now, but the other thing too is I just, I'm trying to wrap my head around the guidance that you guys said you got earlier about having less information for a conditional use permit. I don't understand why you would want less information for a large scale.
I asked that question.
Permit than you would for a site plan review, because we're talking about freaking Poland Springs. How many times?
So I sent an email on the 10th of February
I'm
asking,
not asking you to justify it.
asking why we need less, why we would ask for less information. And it was answered pretty much it's because that's how our ordinances are written.
I mean, they didn't, the lawyer wrote this, his ordinance, not with this ordinance in mind, or you're working on, so I don't. It's not-
Yeah, it was an email to the lawyer that helped draft this ordinance. Correct. That's who helped draft it.
Yeah, there might be some history there, we just don't know.
But so, yeah, for conditional use things at all, though, that page 18, if there's a C in there,
Yeah.
that's where this, whatever you guys are on, up, should apply.
Right.
And weed if it says conditional use.
So my exact statement to our attorney regarding the use of an application for a marijuana related business for on the application for conditional use was so I asked, to be clear on this, applicants for operation of cannabis facilities in Parsonsville are required to submit a form that requires less provided information or documentation as would applicants for any other type of business. If this is what the response is, suggesting, can we please clarify why? And my clarification via phone and not on this email was because that's how our ordinance is written. Just so you know, I did ask that question. So I guess in the workshop today, my goal would be to see if we can come up with an application. If we find that this is deemed fit, we do know that it will have to,
Voted on.
it gets voted on, and I think we send it to the selectmen for approval after we approve it, this application. We don't have to do that. I don't want to miss any checks in the box.
I would highly recommend you send it to the attorney.
Yeah.
So in section 2 on this application is more of a review of what the planning board is going to be reviewing. Like potential generation of noise, dust, odor, vibration, glare, smoke, litter, and other nuisances. That's where I think anyone could include their other documentation, like, I guess I'm going back to if they're gonna open a cannabis facility, I intend on using charcoal filters every 10 feet to mitigate odor, so on. But these are all things that we have to check off to make sure that they meet the standard for a conditional permit. Because we can't muck up a conditional permit, period. We can't do it. First of all, it's unfair to applicants, it's unfair to due process. One, if we muck it up, it's a pain in the ass to revisit it. Technically, according to the ordinance, they cannot come back before us for 2 years if we deny a conditional permit. Unless we meet all kinds of other things, like it's the opinion of the board, like so if 5 of us think that we screwed up, we can revisit it. Substantial new evidence can be brought forward, which is basically an appeal format. The planning board finds an error of law or misunderstanding of facts that has been made. An amendment to this ordinance has been made, which changes the status, circumstance, or conditions of the initial matter brought beforehand. So I think it's very important that we have all this information to review when we're doing a conditional use permit so that we don't put people through this. And maybe I'm overreacting, you can tell me that.
Once been,
And again, if you guys just jumping back to the cover page, you notice I added some things to our traditional cover page, asking for, dates of when things are advertised, where they were advertised, which are questions that get asked to us often, and we don't have to constantly look up and be like, hey, Desiree. And it's just another checklist to ensure that we have not missed any of the very important regulations.
yeah, well,
Desiree already keeps on the outside of folders up on her desk. If you ever want to come here and go through her desk, which is not here. She doesn't like it, but you could do it. I made a note, it is also our other thing that, the butters have to understand that they may be in another municipality. So 500 feet doesn't just mean 500 feet in Parsonsfield.
excuse me, there's another typo here. On that second page again, 2, unusual physical characteristics of the steam, including lot size, shape. So, what do you mean?
I'll have to tell you what that was. Autocorrect is not always my friend.
No, not mine either. Hasn't got me into trouble, but a few misunderstandings.
It's unusual characteristics of the site,
Site, okay.
which I hesitate using that term because it refers always back to site plan.
You had an electric shock as soon as you saw it?
Yeah, maybe I was like, eh.
Go to something
I sent
else.
you a PDF of this document and the Word.
Thank you. Are you guys okay if I move stuff around and make it look prettier?
Yeah.
I'll work on that, get it back out. And I'll send it to you guys, or Friday, so you guys are all up to date on everything before the 19th.
Okay, thanks.
You guys want to look at this? You're welcome to take my copy. No scratch marks. Again, I would like to say I've taken credit for this big genius thing I came up with, but it's a regurgitation of exactly what's written in the book, which is the safest way to go. Not really regurgitation, it's actually word for word. Maybe here or there, I was like, well, this doesn't have to have here, there, too, 5 times, but,
Condensed version.
it's actually not. I actually
No.
expanded on it. Because again, I think sometimes if someone's coming in for this application, how much information do the 2 women in the office have to provide them? So I think there's a lot more details that they would normally not get without being referred to our ordinance book, which may not have a copy on hand. They may not have access to online.
Right.
So our entire ordinance is in this application
Yeah.
for conditional use.
Yeah, no, looks good. Nice job.
So I think when we vote to approve it, then we also have to look at, we also know this doesn't cover all the bases for the cannabis ordinance, which has been so highly debated.
Right.
Because a lot of those items and questions aren't part of what we have to do here. They follow the selectmen.
We're talking about the licensing.
Yeah, and the state, you
Yeah.
know, so this is just the use of the building or the space for that. JP, do you want to copy this? Thank you. Because I think that if I read the application and the ordinance correctly, Jen, I'm sorry, I keep yelling at you, but you're the only select person here. A lot of the information gathered for a cannabis facility comes more from the selectmen than from the planning board. We're just approving the space
You're approving conditional use.
of the
You're
space.
approving conditional use.
Yep. So the business itself and the licensing part of the business all fall to the folks in the front office. Questions? And anybody that wants a copy of this can take it, where obviously doesn't need to make some changes. Oh, there's some more right here too. I apologize, I meant to have it done in the last meeting.
Only so many hours in a day.
So did they get this conditional use application at the time? I just wanna make sure I get my timeline right. So in terms of cannabis, are they gonna get the application for the license first or the conditional use first?
Conditional use, and according to the ordinance as it's written, they get that from the CEO.
Okay, so
That's,
they go to the CEO to get this permit, but the license for cannabis comes from the girls in the front office.
no, the license comes from the select board. The only thing that Danielle is gonna do is check it for,
When they turn it in?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to
yep,
go against what I read.
so they'll get a conditional
What I've
use.
seen.
And
So
then,
before you give them a license application, they'll already need a conditional use? Or can they be doing them both simultaneously?
they'll probably have the conditional use with the application that they hand in.
At the same time?
Yeah, because we wouldn't consider it until that is handed in, so.
So a person, again, sorry if I'm being repetitive, I just want to clear all the dust. If I want to decide I wanted to open a special magic brownie shop across the street in a traveling camper, I'm just kidding. I would get
That would go
application.
against the common.
That goes against the comprehensive plan, but I would get that I could get those applications simultaneously. I could come in and see you and ask for a license application, and I could go over to the next office and ask Jesse for the conditional use permit,
Yes.
but I couldn't return my license application to you until I had my conditional use permit approved.
But there's a license application that they can get from, that just says, what you're applying to.
Yep.
Like, you need whether you're doing a cannabis facility or a retail store or what have you. So they get that application with their name and everything else that's on it. And then they can apply for the conditional use permit application. And then they fill out what we have in our licensing ordinance that's required.
From you,
Yes.
or not you specifically, sorry.
Right.
The board-
They can use the ordinance itself and answer those questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're getting 2 license applications from the select board?
They're getting a license from the select board and an application.
But it requires 2 forms,
Yes.
an initial form and then a more detailed form after they get their conditional use.
Well, they'll get a license from us. They'll get an application form
Yeah.
that just says what they're applying for. They'll get-
I really am not trying to put you on the
No,
spot.
that's okay. No, that's totally okay. What they get from the select board is the license saying that they have permission to use that.
So that's the end all.
Yes.
That's the goal. But to get to the process to get there requires them to see the select board twice. The initial
No.
paper.
No,
Okay, where did I miss that?
they'll go to the office and say, can I have an application for a cannabis, whatever.
The front office? or-
Yep, and it's just one single piece of paper.
Okay,
If you would like a copy of that, I can.
I have it in the book.
Yep.
I just don't want to mess it. So I'm gonna cover
I'm
this
sure
from,
we will, this is all.
I'm covering this from A to B. Thanks for your faith. No, yeah, I'm sure you will mess it up.
No, not you, I mean.
So they'll get a form from the girls, then they could go across the hall and get a form from Jesse. Then they would come before us, and then once we give them that conditional use approval, yes or no, assuming it's yes, they would include that with the packet they would then take to the select board to get their actual license.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say they would review their application with me. And I submit it to the planning board, just like the site plan review.
The girls across the office.
Well, the way it's supposed to
Like,
be.
Yeah.
and everything.
I'll back
I'll
into
have a
the,
date and time on there.
correct.
There's one other
They
thing
wouldn't
that
see it
I'm
till
not
it's all done.
seeing on here or haven't failed to mention, but with a conditional use, the last one that I was involved in, they had to come before the planning board every 2 years.
So, and what I read in the conditional use permit is that the conditional use permit, once it is established, is permanent in law of the land.
Runs with the land.
Runs with the land, literally.
Well, they have to, the reason that them conditional use permits, they had to come before the planning board, they had to read out the list of conditions that have been imposed on that business.
So yes, the planning board does have the right on the conditional use permit to extend conditions, street improvements, access restrictions, hours of use, buffering and screening, utility performance guarantee for required off-site improvement. And they are not limited to that. So apparently we could pose any condition we wanted on this approval.
Right.
Then I believe we would have to also impose a time for which they would have to revisit that to make sure that it's being enforced, I guess. Because otherwise, provided all conditions and standards of approval are met, because that's a condition. So if I said you can have a permit, but the condition is that you have to mow your lawn, provided that you always mow your lawn, it's there forever.
Right.
That's why I didn't put a timeline in there.
Okay.
And is there nothing I read that says that we have a set time from the time we receive the application to approve, correct? Anybody else know anything different? So if you give us an application for conditional use, we have until we're ready to hear it.
There's nothing in there.
I want to make sure we're also on timelines properly.
I would try to stick to the site plan timeline, but
Oh, I'm a-
you're not held to it, but I would.
I'm a
try to-
firm believer in due process, so I think that things should get in and get out and be done with it. It's fair to everybody and
Can I suggest like an SOP for the conditional use process?
sure.
So like a little checklist of, okay, you've been to the office to get your license, you've been to Jesse to get your permit, so you have everything on the application, but like an actual checklist just to leave like at the front of the file, it could be checked off, dated, initialed, whatever. So that if somebody gets lost in the process or something, they know where they stopped.
Yep, I think that's a good thing. Maybe that should be on the cover we get that form. Just as a reference point.
David, I have a question.
Yeah.
Everything is looking good, but where do we step off on this cannabis and giving information to the select board in order for them to make a decision? Do we check off that? How do they know?
No,
that-
so we don't really step on. We're just approving,
The
we're
building.
approving the conditional use. So we haven't given them any permission
No,
to go forward.
no. How do we give them information from what we have on this, on a list here of approval?
How do we give an applicant?
I think he's asking like what finding of facts do they need to have from
Yeah,
us,
and
I
how
think
do
is what
we
he's trying
give
to.
them a checklist as to, so that they can make a decision?
You mean the select board?
Yes.
So in that application or in our ordinance as well, there's only a specific list of things we would ask, which is less than you would ask on a normal site review or site plan application. And it was directed, it was advised by our town attorney that that's all the information that the planning board asks, is just what's in the ordinance. Capacity of sewage, capacity of storm drainage. Again, some of the things are the same as the site plan. Fire department is different from the site plan. To provide necessary protection services to the site development. Unusual characteristics of site, which is the lot size, shape of lot, topography, soils, which may cause an adverse impact to surrounding properties. I think that's one of the things the conditional use permit seems to look at, is not only how it affects that particular site, but how it affects the community surrounding it. And once those are all met, which some of that will probably be met with the supplemental documentation as a space for them to give us on the first page. That's when we would include that with our letter of approval or not, and that they would take to the planning board. And if, I'm assuming if we don't approve it, then they have to go to the Board of Appeals.
How it goes.
Table?
Can I just say something? regarding the-
Yeah.
How you said, you don't have to give anything to the select board. What you'll do is give it to the applicant, and the applicant is the one who will submit it with other materials. So there's nothing that we need from you to tell us. All we need from you is to give them whatever they need for a conditional use permit, and then it comes to us.
I'm not
Now,
sure.
is this permit, is the signed application that I provided you guys sufficient as the proof of the permit, or do we have to give a different form?
Like a letter of decision.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Well, it has an approval status on the back of the application anyway.
I haven't seen the
whether-
application.
Right.
So I did put one on there because I wasn't sure what we were looking for. I mean, sometimes actually have an official permit, you have to hang it in the wall. So I didn't know where we.
I haven't seen it, but, and I think that the attorney will be able to answer some of those questions more clearly.
I just want to make sure before we make a
still
vote.
vote on that and say, well, okay, there is 4 to 5, or say 3 people didn't.
Abstained or whatever, yeah.
It's a
We
vote
just put that
process.
number on the bottom and say, okay, this is what our vote came through.
I think that would go in the letter of findings. Am I incorrect in that?
Just a little see.
I don't think we've ever put in a letter, your application was approved 4-3. Jim Barron said no. And all of us said yes, and one person
This
abstained.
is-
I'm asking that question because there was a lot of questions that came up that, in this last process. And I'm under the impression that Desiree can facilitate these applications as well as the approval letters for them. Is everyone else in agreement with that? Does anybody else think that that is incorrect? Let's put it that way. Because in my communication with the town attorney, he did say that a town staff member should not be writing letters of approval for the planning board, which I don't understand, or did I get an answer to? So I want us all to be aware of that so we can make sure we question that later. Because in the time that I've been here, even as an alternate,
It's always been
the
that way.
secretary has always been the one to write those letters. And then it was also suggested that that letter then gets voted on, which I don't understand, because then we're voting on what we just approved.
Yeah, we already approved it.
To reapprove.
Usually it's
So those
approved.
are questions that we need to ask
Double
Attorney
check.
McCall.
That's a lawyer for.
I mean, we could have a standard letter for, for approval. And
Yep.
all we have to do is just
Sign it.
sign it and just change whoever the chairman is.
Unfortunately, he also says that we should have detailed findings of fact on every item in the application.
That's what I don't understand.
Did you guys read my correspondence with him?
I did.
I specifically said, you're telling us that we need to line item vote on every item in the application as we go through it, and he said yes. Meaning, site application or conditional use permit, item A, we have to take a vote. Item B, we have to take a vote. Item C, we have to take a vote. At the end, we have to take a vote. Then we have to write the letter, and then we have to vote that the letter's okay. Which is going to quadruple the time it takes us to go through an application. And I'm not stirring shit pot, but we have the attorney coming to see us, so I want everybody to be,
Aware of it.
yeah, I want you to be conscious of that advice so that we can make sure we can get clarification on exactly what processes we're not following. Because anything that I've read, that in any town I've talked to, which is I think 9, that none of them work that way.
Yeah, it's always been you accept or
But
deny
we
the whole
cannot get
thing.
advice on that from the MMA. They have declined advising us on it because our town attorney has already advised us.
Interesting.
Can I ask a procedural question about something you said? You said that the conditional use permit, according to what you read, is there in perpetuity, right? Or it's there just everlasting until it's changed?
Well, unless you come through with one of the items in
Conditions.
section 5.
So in the case of a cannabis application, when it comes to Parsons Field, what's gonna happen when ownership changes?
If the new owner wants to open a cannabis facility, that approval runs with the land, runs with the,
So but our ordinance says otherwise, correct?
If they sell it and that new owner wants to continue in that business, they have to reapply.
For a license, yeah.
Yes.
Why would they need to reapply for a conditional use permit for the facility if it's already been
No, they-
conditionally used?
So they wouldn't have to.
They wouldn't.
they wouldn't have to.
No, because it runs with the land.
Right.
Correct.
So
Just the license.
that would lock that piece of land in for that 750-foot buffer for forever. That means that.
Unless you
no
go
other
back to
place-
section 5.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
So what happens though if that place goes out of business?
I think that would be one of the section 5 informations that, I'm sorry, not section 5, section 6 reapplication.
So you're worried that if another cannabis facility would be closer, then you'd have that 750 buffer?
So, I mean.
I understand what you're getting
And
at.
let me put this in like very specific terms. So let's just use Trevor as an example.
Right.
Okay. So Trevor came before the board here, and I understand that he did an application that had more information than apparently what you guys need for your conditional use thing. And I'm not talking about his application specifically in this case. I'm talking about generalities. But so he got his conditional use permit approved. Okay. Now that runs in 100 years time or for whatever, according to whatever's established here, right? So now his facility has a 750-foot buffer around it forever, as long as he wants and wants to stay in business, right? Now,
I don't know what the cannabis ordinance is about. I don't know if they say by license, if it's by license, or if it's by facility.
It is by, that's another question for the attorney. Are you saying that if there was no business, like it went out of business or the building was empty, there's no business there? There's no longer a cannabis business in a building?
Would the buffer stay?
right, because what they're reading is the
It runs with the
conditional use
land.
permit runs with the land and it stays
Right.
like that in perpetuity.
Yes, but does the conditional use permit say anything about a 750-foot buffer?
Well, you're
It doesn't say anything about that
In your
in our ordinance that we deal
Right.
with. That's
on
on
cannabis,
Right.
your cannabis ordinance says that.
Right.
correct, but we don't deal directly with the cannabis ordinance, they do.
The planning board still does. They're trying to say that you guys don't, but the planning board absolutely deals with any land ordinance that touches this town.
So that's a question for the
Licensing
attorney.
ordinance,
It can be a licensing ordinance all day long, but
it's a standard.
if it touches land use, the planning board will still deal with it. There's a land use component to it, and that's why the town attorney emailed you specifically, Jen, saying that you can't represent the planning board when it comes to these matters.
I don't. Can't represent them.
Well, I think,
I know that you don't, that's why he specifically.
JP, I think that's an interesting question. We'll have to talk to the attorney to see how we can unshackle it.
But I misspoke. Section 6 is the reapplication process. So that is a change of circumstance that someone could come before the board and say, I don't want to say his building, that Bloomers is no longer a marijuana facility, so we'd like to open one across the street. So we need a conditional use permit based on the fact that under this reapplication section, this other business has been out of business for 10 years, which would void the 750-foot buffer, I would assume, if you read it flat out. It does go against the next paragraph, which says run with the land. But maybe it should have been section 7, then section 6. They're all good questions, I think, and we should make a very concise list to ask Attorney McCall. Well, there was a lot of information volleyed back and forth between him and I don't think that we came to a satisfactory resolution of understanding of why he felt I asked for him to give me some data to back up his advice, which he has offered to do in person. So that goes to really our first 3 items. This permit. This application. So Desiree, can you please confirm with Attorney McCall he can attend our next meeting? So that way we would be able to vote on this application. And I don't want to cram any application down anyone's throat, but I think it's time we have it in place because besides the things that are currently in the Board of Appeals, other things are going to come up and they need to be given the correct paperwork between now and then. And I did look at our ordinance, our cannabis ordinance, like there's things about, a sketch map detailing daycares or schools or so on, but that's not in our land use ordinance. So I need to know if, but we have the right to ask that according to the way that ordinance is written. But I don't think we can deny the application based on it. That's up to the selectmen to do. They don't flow super smoothly together, so hopefully this application and these questions that we can ask the attorney can get them to flow good for anybody that is applying through the process. And please feel free, Desiree, do you mind sharing with everyone that application so that they have via email, so they have a chance to make any further notes?
Yeah.
I apologize for only sending it to Desiree. I was really quick and I was on my work email, which I'm trying not to use for the planning board after I asked not to last time. So I didn't have time to switch computers and be here on time. So that's why everybody didn't get a copy of it. And there was I don't think there was even a message with it. I just said for tonight.
For our review tonight.
Yeah, so there's no secrecy.
Basically, we just have to wait for all this lawyer to be here.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, like that, language thing. I don't,
Send a message,
okay,
it doesn't matter.
Basically,
right, well,
well, now they're out.
really,
They're on the
oh, that's good.
Thursday next week. Questions regarding ordinances from anybody on the board or the public or processes and procedures, site plan review, which is what we're under this item. Got a question? Go ahead, JP.
So not related to anything specific, but, my time going through MMA training and on the board, I recollect them teaching us that when we have an applicant or an application going through a process, that if we ran into a problem or an issue, that we would have to see the applicant and process through, even if we noted something wasn't completely like how we wanted it intended to be in the end, or from the onset. And changes would have to be like voted into place and fixed afterwards. Things like applications being changed, or the way that things are submitted or processes done. And I'm just wondering how you guys as a board feel about all these applications going through, being voted upon, and then being forced to go through these things and be readdressed when they haven't even come to completion, fruition. Because I don't see any fairness to it at all for anybody.
So in my training with the MMA, I think that we're on somewhat of the same page. I was led to believe that ambiguity in the law or the process falls
to the applicant. Yeah.
The error of the municipality, it falls to the applicant. I cannot ask that question until after we talk to Attorney McCall of the MMA, because they've already told me they refuse to comment on it. I think everyone should speak up. If he said, I've said all along, I think that we are not fairly showing due process to any applicant. There should be a set standard of time that we push people through, and that people, unfortunately, we have a boo-boo, and that people are paying the price for it. From a business perspective, every landlord involved, every business involved, every applicant involved does see some form of harm done to them, and it doesn't matter. We have no clue what their personal conditions are. So small businesses can be greatly affected. That's my opinion. I flat out said, and I'm on record saying, that I thought we should follow through with our original votes,
Approvals, yeah.
and that an error of language or a request of change of language should not hinder the process from going forward for the applicants. The town attorney does not feel that is correct.
I don't want to get you into specific cases.
No, I'm just talking in general.
Yeah.
So when he comes, I want to get some direct explanation for what we have, which is going to be tough to specifically, well, it's not because he's our attorney, but there's a lot of questions we can't ask because some of the issues that we want to ask about are in the appeal process at the moment. So that they're really not under the oversight of this board any longer. But there are, questions about what happens once that's done. Where do they land? Do they land back here for us to do it all over again? Or are decisions just voided and vacated? I don't know that. And we won't know until after the 13th when the board meets. Everyone else can feel free to say what they think, please, because I'm not the only one that has a voice here.
Oh, I agree with you 100% on it. I think the hardship dealing with it. We've already ruled on it once, and sucks that they have to pay for it.
Not to get off topic, Jen, and not to keep driving the bus over the top of you, just a question. So it was brought to my attention, it was brought to my attention by someone the other day that we have two town attorneys, is that correct?
We do.
So we have Mr. McCall and then our original town attorney.
David Laurie is retained on a couple of cases that he's been on for quite some time.
Did we bring Attorney McCall in specifically for the cannabis, or is it? I'm curious why we have two attorneys. And if it's not
He's
my,
getting ready to retire.
okay,
Okay, and really didn't feel as if he had enough knowledge on cannabis.
okay. So. That begs the question that when we were in the town meeting, that I believe, and I'll have to rewatch it, that Attorney McCall, which again, I was surprised at his presence, so I was off my listening game a little bit. If I reviewed the video, I thought he said numerous times that he was deferring to the other attorneys because they were more knowledgeable than he was.
Oh, I think he was talking about maybe Jill Jill Cohen? Yeah, maybe, because she was in the audience.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
He's not a cannabis lawyer. He is a municipal lawyer.
So I mean, again, if this is beyond the scope of question I should ask in this meeting, is the town's intention is for Attorney McCall to take over for Attorney Laurie in the end, once Attorney Laurie retires completely?
We hope so.
I was just curious. When somebody said, hey, do you know we still have two attorneys? I said, I did know that. And I think it's because I made the comment and questioned why on another thing and that David Laurie was still involved.
Right.
So they said, oh, you know, he's the attorney on the.
He's handled a couple of cases that, he's been on for so long. It's felt that was a better way to go. Yep.
But
And, from a select board standpoint, or a facility licensing standpoint too, we're asking. What's so funny? What's so funny?
Hold on.
We're asking for conditional use, and I think it's been in your land use development ordinance for, it's there. That's all.
I don't deny.
It's just that it's on our docket, I guess. That's just the bad luck of being where we are at the time, so don't take it personally.
Oh, I don't. I think it's my goal to correct properly for both the town and the residents that are before us this process, which is why that application is way more detailed than I would assume we need it to be. But I also don't think that everyone that comes before us gets the information that they necessarily need. I mean, none of them are running around with these books. So that's why I put so much information in that application, because it's literally, if you have a question, it's in your application. It's verbatim, except for my spelling mistakes. It's verbatim in your application so that there's no question to it. And I do have some questions about procedures of going forward with things, but we can't discuss those right now. We're just gonna, procedures of how we handle things later. But I would like to make sure that going forward from this point, not that I do not care about what has gone behind it, we have something in place so that we don't find ourselves back in the same staff that we're in. That makes any sense. That was a lot of talk around for saying we're not going to talk about what we're not going to talk about. So how do we fix it so we don't have to talk about it again?
When we can talk about it, we'll figure it out.
Well, you let me know when we can talk about it, because we can't talk about it right now. Anybody else on policies and procedures? Okay, so we're moving on to our next item. I believe is a reminder that we have a site walk. I just put my agenda here. At 26 Reed Lane, coming up next Sunday at 1. Is that correct? Sunday at 1.
A week from Sunday.
What's
A week from Sunday.
A week from Sunday at 1.
Yeah.
Which will be the week before
The meeting.
the meeting, which we will then be talking about that site plan. I think that's all that was on tonight's agenda. Wrapping up with public questions, even though it's just a workshop, which you gentlemen took the time out to come in, so I want to respect that. Thank you all for coming. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you, Jen, for being in the hot seat. Sorry.
Say it one more time.
Just a lot of questions.